of say sorry to the so-called conspiracy theorists who in the past have discussed the possibility of the whole thing being real. As you know, I have published lately a book which is The Rise and Fall of a Frankist Monster, which is based on the Sabbatian Frankist cult, which was behind Jeffrey Epstein. So when I saw what was going on, and I actually read this article by Sharon Waxman, which is the founder and CEO and editor-in-chief of The Wrap, by the way, also a former journalist from the New York Times, so a mainstream journalist who has won various awards, best-selling author. I realized that it was about time to also write an article about people finally having this realization now that maybe behind Jeffrey Epstein, it wasn't only about, of course, it was also about money. It was also about power. It was also about a blackmail sting operation, honey traps of sorts that will lead to led us to various intelligence agencies. But as we said in the last show, where you kindly offered me the possibility of presenting my book, the main thing that people get very confused on, Michael, is that it wasn't Jeffrey Epstein working for the Mossad, working for the CIA, is the other way around, because the whole deep state in the US as well as Israel is controlled by the Sabbatian Frankists as well as the Jesuits. We had the ulterior confirmation of this from a visit that happened just in the last few hours at the Vatican, which is quite incredible. Pope Leo XIV, who is, as you know, connected to Chicago, guested Governor J.B. Pritzker. And J.B. Pritzker comes from a family of Sabbatian Frankists from Ukraine. So it's, and when we see also how then Leo XIV, who we have discussed many times on your show, and who from the very beginning I told you was probably worse than Pope Francis himself, though he was crafted and molded by Pope Francis. I think that is important that people realize this alliance has been going on for a long time between these heretical Jews as well as heretical Christians, because I don't think that there is anybody in the right mind that can say that the Jesuits have been always, really the representatives of Jesus. Contrary to their name, Company of Jesus, they are actually, like I said in Volume 12, the very last to have that genuinity about Jesus and as our Lord and our Savior. So I think that today we are in a very different world from yesterday, because yesterday demonstrated what I already told you, that if Trump maintained himself ostracizing the Epstein files, he will eventually lose control of his party. And so suddenly he opened up. But the problem is, will anything be revealed? Well, that's a different thing. That's a different thing. Unfortunately, there is already various things that, let's say, are moving behind the scenes that make me think that probably there is going to be highly redacted material, or maybe material that is going to be simply pointing on one political side rather than the other. The Americans are not going to stand for all this. So this is going to be a disservice to the American people, because this whole matter was politicized in a way which shouldn't have, we should never support in any way, shape or form the pedophiles. And that's why this book, as you know, is dedicated to the victims of Jeffrey Epstein. I don't care, about the White House and what they think. If they are in the wrong, I condemn them. But just think for a moment, Michael, who we had in the White House for the last few decades. A bunch of perverts, all of them.
Absolutely.
All of them. So we start, we want to start with Bill Clinton. Well, no comment. A guy, aside from Monica Lewinsky, we know that he was flying on the Lolita Express very frequently. Then who we have? George W. Bush, who apparently brought male prostitutes to the White House. And who we have next? Obama, who had a guy a guy called Sinclair in a limo when he was still a senator, doing him a blow without. I mean, I don't even want to say blowjob because now everybody's talking about, this Baba, who's this and that. But the problem is that it's not about one president, it's about a system. So today, we want to go deep into that system to understand a little bit better who are the protagonists. And I think if we want to really dig deeper into this whole thing, first of all, we have to go to the very origins of the Epstein case, which, as you know, are also not only, they are not only in what we already know, but in what has been covered up because it's part of the history, the legacy of America that starts from people like Samuel Bronfman, that starts from people who are not even mentioned nowadays because they were already either dead or on their way to dying by the time Epstein came into the scene. So this kind of understanding brings us to, for example, when it comes down to the dark secrets of the United States, we have people who maybe presented themselves in a certain way, and we always have accepted these people as being the guides of our society, the philanthropists, all these people who maybe, we perceive as being just, but in reality they are not. One of these people who in reality had a very dark and sinister background, aside from his public one, was a guy who died in 1976 when Jeffrey Epstein was just starting to raise his profile by being recruited by Donald Barr. And I'm talking about a guy called Levis Rosenstiel, who was of course, a Jewish person, known for his philanthropist fundraiser and for Jewish causes. He was the founder of Shanley Industries and an American liquor company, very active during, of course, the Prohibition years. But who is behind all that? And who is he connected to? Well, and how does he get all the way then to Donald J. Trump and to Jeffrey Epstein? Because these are things that need to be discussed today in order to have a more honest and clear vision of things. And so today, I hope that we can clarify such matters. So for me, today is about clearing and understanding that, for example, Levis Rosenstiel created in the background of America's, let's say, the American dream of the 1950s, a blackmailing operation that was exactly like Epstein. And who inherited this operation? Somebody who then was very close to the future president of the United States, who I have talked about also in my latest book. Somebody who took from that blackmailing legacy, which went and blackmailed even people like J. Edgar Hoover, the head of the FBI. So people will say, but who is this connection that brings us all the way to Donald J. Trump? Well, that connection is Roy Cohn. The Roy Cohn who was connected to Ronald Reagan's administration, but Roy Cohn was the mentor of Donald J. Trump, and he was the guy who actually inherited from the previously mentioned Levis Rosenstiel the whole backbone of this blackmailing operation. So I think that it's very important to understand that Jeffrey Epstein is not the only one. He's probably not going to be the last one, but he was definitely not the first one to do all this. And he inherited himself almost a position from the people before him who were doing these kind of things. Now, people will say, but here we're talking, people fantasize now about an email where it says Trump is blowing Baba, okay? But let me tell you, Roy Cohn died of AIDS, and he was one of the most depraved people in Studio 54.
Wow.
Go and check Google and the photos of Roy Cohn at Studio 54. Guys, this is not about Trump. This is about a whole system of power of people that present themselves in a certain way, but they are completely the contrary when they are in private. I saw it myself, people surrounding villas with Secret Service operators and stuff just to protect, of course, the officials who were inside, who were maybe doing all kinds of stuff. So the Eyes Wide Shut is a reality. It's a reality that Jeffrey Epstein was involved with. And in my book, I have gone deep into this reality, as you know. And I think it's important that people realize that this reality is not restricted to one person, but it's definitely part of a tradition of the elites. If you think about it, the actual film Eyes Wide Shut, the outside scene when you have, for example, Tom Cruise getting to the villa, the castle, the place where they conduct the ritual. Well, that place belonged to the Rothschild. It used to be the family house of the Rothschild. Roy Cohn inherited. You see how, he wasn't really. The guy could be in a gay pride setup all his life. If you see him by his photos, are you still astonished about somebody blowing somebody else here? So, when in my book inserted Roy Cohn, I inserted him also linked to the B'nai B'rith, linked to the mega group, linked to the systems of power that we have. So I think that this book was very much, for me, the wish was to make it come out in a moment of relevance. And I think this is the best moment possible because everybody is with their eyes on this scandal and wants to know more. And it's going to probably be disappointed by what the system is going to eventually serve them with, because no matter what, they're going to put the national security in front of it all because you can see that, you can see this. Do you really think they're going to show you Ehud Barak raping Virginia Giuffre? No, they're never going to show you Ehud Barak. There is going to be World War III and a bunch of nuclear weapons detonating before that will ever happen.
Yep.
So it's like, so I think that instead of wasting your time in the, in this, even in idealizing Trump, we should come to the awareness of reality. And you know me, I've always been a realist. I know that at times this makes people uncomfortable because they like to be a little bit, on the safe side. And maybe they like to also idealize people and the possibility that we can defeat the New World Order. Listen, guys, you can't defeat what you have in your pocket. You can't defeat what you have in your bank. You can't defeat a system that is basically owns you in every way, in every way you are moved. You have a system that in some way owns you. You put your money in the bank, they own you. You work for somebody, you take a salary, you are part of the institutions that, of course, service this great United States of America. Some way down the line, there is some kind of level of compromise. And for me, it's important today to understand and explain to the people that the Sabbatianism and Frankism, with their distinct tendency to practice heretical rituals, to encourage the overstepping and inversion of established religious laws and rules, because in the end is about these people being able to preach outwards that they have some kind of belief, either Christian, either Muslim, either Jew. They say, oh, we are great Christians, and then maybe if you see them in their private life, they have this lover, this other lover, they go with this and they do that and blah blah blah. It was very easy for a gentleman called Ataturk, who founded modern Turkey, to simply put a bunch of imams into a train called that we know as the Orient Express, and fill it up with prostitutes, and from that moment onwards, blackmail them for life. So it's about also the blackmail system, which is part of it all and has been for a long time. Now, Roy Cohn was part of this Sabbatian Frankist vision of things, of these dark demonic powers, which in Judaism are known also as the klipot, that are naturally ingrained in every man's constitution, and they oppose each act of salvation. And they are, of course, they are selling all this as a way to bind people together. So it's not only, the ritual in itself, but the fact that you participate to something forbidden, something that is a little bit like when the Skull and Bones, during their initiation ritual, have, these people who for a whole night have to confess all their most all their secrets to a bunch of strangers. So it kind of creates really the bond that will never end, that bond. And so at times I noticed that in Satanism, those practices, may they be the sacrifice of a child, the rape of a minor, anything that is forbidden and perverse becomes also a matter of deep union between the parts. Now, going back to Eyes Wide Shut, this film was ended and edited after the death of Stanley Kubrick. And apparently there were parts that were omitted from the film. There is a lot of discussion about the end of the film. And why is that? There is apparently 20 to 30 minutes that are missing from this film. But, when you edit, you can throw away things that maybe don't fit with the narrative. But in this case, apparently, there were things that were deemed dangerous. And one of the things that is often discussed is that the last scene was in reality Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman giving their child to the pedocult.
Oh, wow.
So just to give, when you see this movie, you see obvious reference to sexual magic. And sexual magic is a practice that as I explain in my book, has their very roots in Sabbatian Frankism. I mean, of course, there might have been perverts since ancient times doing all kinds of depraved things in the ancient Rome as well as in later situations. But the fact that they codified the rituals in a way that they functioned for also an elite of people, well, that is a typical thing that was done by the Sabbatians. I mean, you see, there is the Sabbatians and then there is the Frankists, but they have, maybe some similarities. And they, of course, have a lot in common, because in the end, the Frankists were simply the Sabbatians with added elements, especially the cult of the female divinity, possibly in the shape of a sacred maiden or a whore that is subject to collective practices of devotion and adoration. Well, isn't that what Anton LaVey did with his Church of Satan in his Black Masses? It's exactly the same. And in fact, Anton LaVey was Anton Levi, and his family came from Thessaloniki, and they were Sabbatians. So the very roots of modern Satanism are in this cult of very powerful people. The fact that, for example, in Frankism in particular, a tendency to reinforce military customs. There was a lot of discipline. including the application of hierarchical structures. And this is very important because, as you know, even in the mafia, there is a hierarchical structure, and often they borrow military, military terms or military, like the guy's a colonel or the guy's a general or the guy's. And so there is always been the use of a hierarchical structure, and this, of course, also with the possibility that at the moment what we are seeing is going to develop in two directions. So it's one direction in which they will actually go after maybe 10 to 12 people in those files and expose them to the legality of it all, which means they will eventually get sentenced. But that is a possibility I personally have very little belief in, Michael. Because we are talking people who are very powerful, people who can buy entire states if they want. People who own.
They may make some patsies or sacrifices of their group, but as we know, they'll tell somebody to sacrifice himself so that you're doing it for the good of the whole community, and that's why they do it.
Yeah, but remember that there is also so much material that has been made already public, and the people have and a lot of expectance. If you just go after some, now, for example, in the last few days, there has been a lot of talk in regards to one of the characters that was probably important, but still, to tell you the truth, minor respect to other characters. I'm talking here about Summers, the guy from Harvard. Now, you know that I have Larry Summers. I have dedicated a whole chapter to Harvard in my book. I have explained that Jeffrey Epstein had an office in Harvard, went in and out of Harvard, where, like you're wearing now, like your hoodie, he had the thing with written Harvard, he went around with it. He was very much present in Harvard. So today we have the exposure finally of somebody like Larry Summers. But Larry Summers also is resigning from OpenAI board because he was part of the OpenAI board. Which is a very important position, because today OpenAI is a very important part of the new tech industries, and developing the AI. There is OpenAI, and then you have maybe Elon Musk, and you have maybe some other player, but OpenAI is regarded as the main player in this business at the moment. So the fact that he had to, people, for example, also when it comes to Lex Wexner also is involved in the AI. I mean, all these people are involved in the AI. They're involved in robotics. Himself, Jeffrey Epstein, was involved in financing what became the software for Sophia the robot. So people maybe should realize that it's not about simply some depraved individuals having an orgy. It's a little bit more to it, no?
Yeah, and Epstein was money laundering for the elite as well, paying off people with the money that they would give him, and then that they need that. They always need somebody to money launder, the dark money that comes in, and he was expert at that. The CIA does, they'd have black ops, and they need to have money laundered into that. And, so they do human trafficking. I've seen this overseas. They do human trafficking, weapons trafficking, drug trafficking. And then they have someone like Jeffrey Epstein that will funnel that money in. They'll create a facade business. And in that facade business, they'll have someone collecting information. I saw that all the time when I was in the CIA. So Jeffrey Epstein was a facade business.
Well, Jeffrey Epstein, like I said, there was a facade business, but he was also not working for the CIA, like I explained. There was maybe the CIA that was working for Jeffrey Epstein and the people behind him, which is also the case for the Mossad, which is also the case for Shin Bet, which is also the case for MI6, MI5, or all the other agencies involved. When it comes, for example, to the mega group, which I discussed the other time, one of the characters was Lauder, the Estee Lauder Cosmetics name comes into no. But the fact that there was also a banking lodge, banking and finance lodge of the B'nai Brit. I talk about this in my book, and it's very important because it was connected to Cohn and to Ronald Lauder. Now, these are very important people here because apparently, like I said, Cohn was running a similar operation to Jeffrey Epstein. Then he dies of AIDS. And then we have, though, right in the period, which is like 1996, we have also Lauder as a major financer of Israel's Likud party, which then starts to rise because, at the time it was the labor Zionists that were more successful politically in Israel. And so then it kind of turns around. But the year that Roy Cohn died, it was 1986, sorry. And then 10 years later, we had that happening with the financing of the Likud party. But it was at that point that we see also with Ray Cohn that it's almost like he dies in 1986. The moment Ray Cohn dies is almost like Jeffrey Epstein picks up his blackmailing operation. That is what I came to the conclusion of in my research. I mean, it's like 85, 86, when Les Wexner gives him that building, with cameras in Manhattan. Apparently, instead, it was before they got to financing Jeffrey Epstein's operation. Apparently, Ray Cohn was conducting this operation in a very important hotel in New York that apparently was owned at one point also later on by Trump. And in this hotel, they will have minors and people involved in a situation similar to the Eyes Wide Shut kind of scenario. We know that there is...
So do you think that Trump was involved in some of that?
Okay, there is a lot of people that tend to defend Trump because they say Trump, in a way, has been servicing the system for, like an informant almost. So they tend to give Trump the benefit of the doubt by having him linked to a informant kind of figure. Right. But the problem is that over and over again, we see that, it goes a little bit above that informant kind of, how we can say, of level of participation, let's say. So in between 85, 87, Epstein becomes his relationship with his principal financier, which is Les Wexner, which was closely associated with Lauder, who, by the way, because together they will also found the mega group in 1991. So there is a connection there that is very strong. From my sources, Les Wexner and Epstein were already working from 1985. Some people claim 87, but I found some credible sources that he was already, because already from that moment onwards, he makes him basically use the whole building that he will eventually give for $1. That is very symbolic, sell to Jeffrey Epstein. So we have the origin of the mega group, which is with very powerful figures. But let's not forget that these powerful figures, like we said, are from the Sabbatian Frankist milieu. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu, where does he come from? Where is he originated from? He's originating from Polish Sabbatian Frankism, the family. So here it's like, you put together all these elements and you find that these people are all interconnected, that basically there was a connection that goes all the way to Shimon Peretz, to other people, like I said, Bronfman, and so I think that Edgar Bronfman was probably one of the most important figures. Then we have also the Anti-Defamation League director, Abby Foxman. Now, let's not forget that the Anti-Defamation League was founded by the B'nai B'rith, and in my book I show that the B'nai B'rith is a Sabbatian Frankist creation, because in reality B'nai B'rith, if interpreted as Rabbi Anterman interpreted, was meaning Shabbatai is my illumination, so more clear than that it can't be. Now, the major supporters of ADL included the Ronald Lauder, of course, which is still a powerful figure to this day. And then you had many others like Max Fisher and so on. But here we are talking about people, it's always like people say, oh, Jeffrey Epstein, his connection with Israel, he was working for the Mossad. And I'm like laughing, because Jeffrey Epstein was much more than that. It was bigger than that.
Oh, yeah.
It was a world enterprise, because you shouldn't restrict the power of the Sabbatian Frankists simply to one country. When they have created a banking system that is worldwide, when 20%, like we said, of the Bank of China is owned by the Rothschild, when the Rothschild themselves have been like inspirational for the film Eyes Wide Shut, because the actual place was a villa of the Rothschild. Mm-hmm. People, wonder sometimes about that, but it's called Mentmore Towers. Mentmore Towers has a long history, because it was in the 1850s that the Rothschild families arrived in this village of Mentmore in Buckinghamshire, and they established what became a very beautiful building, because it is a very beautiful. I mean, you see it outside, when Tom Cruise arrives there with the mask on and the thing, and it was the place where Baron Meyer the Rothschild really developed an incredible situation, because he actually started to buy all the land there in 1846. And it was then sold quite recently. At one point, it became the headquarters of the Maharishi Foundation, which is like another kind of one of these gurus from the 1960s that developed his influence also. So in England, but Baron Rothschild, together with other figures of the Rothschild families, were, as I described in my book, doing what the Frankists wanted to do, to expand themselves, marry into Christian aristocratic families. And initially was Catholic, and then it became members of the Church of England, especially influential for what then became the Balfour Declaration, the very layout that then created the State of Israel. So I think that somebody says, weren't the Rothschild and the royal court? They were, of course, they married into the nobility, but not only in England, also in Austria before that. Also, the process that Jacob Frank started wasn't only the Rothschild, there was a whole group of bankers, the more prominent ones, the more known ones, and probably the ones that everybody has in mind whenever there is a conspiracy theory are the Rothschild. But like you have read in my book, they're not the only ones. They are one of the more influential, but they are not the only ones. And they all help each other, because That is the strength of this whole thing. You see, the Jewish people have been persecuted, and of course they have always had this, this thing of helping each other. But at the same time, the Sabbatian Frankists that infiltrated Judaism and then manipulated from within has become like the virus, let's say, a bit like for the Christian world, the Jesuits. The Jesuits were the virus initially that infiltrated all the reform movement, and then in the end, see where we are now today, where basically most Christian groups of all sorts are controlled by the Vatican, and even the King of England goes there, so it's kind of like all coming together. But like I said, the Eyes Wide Shut indication made by Stanley Kubrick, by simply because you see this Mentmore Towers is in bad condition, so they couldn't film within Mentmore Towers. But because it symbolized for Kubrick the power of the Rothschild, he wanted that image in the collective consciousness to be projected, connected to this Eyes Wide Shut. So I think that is an important element that we can add to our story, together with the fact that nowadays, like I said, there is journalists like the one I mentioned earlier, Sharon Waxman, but also other ones who are more and more admitting that, like the intrepid journalist from the Miami Herald, Julie K. Brown, who was the first to expose Epstein crimes when he was first condemned, says that, and confirmed in a phone call with Sharon Waxman, that Epstein, Eyes Wide Shut, was a reality, and that it was a Eyes Wide Shut cabal that Epstein was heading. However, after these admissions have been made by the mainstream press, I don't think that we will have more of these admissions, because it will get too close to then the very finances of all these newspapers where they work for. And it will be at one point. See, today, The Economist, which is now another thing, The Economist is a prestigious newspaper, a prestigious publication now that we all take information from. Well, The Economist now is being sold, most of it, from Linda Rothschild, personal friend of Jeffrey Epstein and the former Prince Andrew, to John Elkann, who, as I showed here, is one of the rising names of Sabbatian Frankism, and I showed him in my book. And the interesting thing about The Economist today is that they are making some very, very dark forecast for next year. I don't know if you heard about it, but they are the forecast that they are basically saying, The Economist is predicting for 2026 war, pestilence, and financial collapse.
Wow.
And if the Sabbatian Frankists who own it are actually making that public, what do you think is the purpose for doing that? Because, I mean, it seems like either they are telling us what is about to happen, what they're about to do to us in order to achieve the Great Reset, which has always been their ultimate plan by 2030. See, yesterday, one thing that really bothered me was to see, while all this theatrics, politics was going on, there was, of course, the Saudi Arabian prince, head of Saudi Arabia, receiving the White House, and there was the state dinner. In the state dinner, we saw once again Elon Musk. Elon Musk has recently stated in both at the presentation of his robots and his yearly inventions, whatever that is, to his shareholders, he has said one very important thing. Apart, I mean, some of it can be interpreted as maybe over the top, but amongst the various things that he's pushing Optimus, the robot, as the solution for all world problems. Okay. But at the same time, he said that will make most of the planet lose their jobs. So working will be facultative, and he announced the fact that we will all be on a universal income. And I'm talking to you about the dinner that happened yesterday at the White House, because one of the major finances in the world of AI, as I explained in my volume 10 of my confessions, is Saudi Arabia. Is the prince that was received yesterday in the White House. And I mean, Prince Mohammed bin Salman is not a guy that personally I would have received in the White House after what happened on 9/11. Now, it's true, like I explained, that there was 9/11 is partly an inside job as well as an outside job. And but there is a heavy responsibility from Saudi Arabia. But there is also, if you think about it, and this is very, very particular because this is something that really, if you think about this connection, Jeffrey Epstein had a very particular relationship with the Saudi royal family and traveled to the kingdom in the last years of his life. Wow. And he used a foreign passport with fake name to enter Saudi Arabia. And one thing that, and you know, as a former CIA operative, one thing that you can detect in a spy is the use of passports. They always change them all the time. They claim they lose them because they don't want the stamps to be detected by the people in the next place they visit. That is a classic. You know, a normal person, if he goes through all these countries, will have 30 stamps, but then it will be a liability. So he was losing his passport every 2 minutes. But at the same time, the fact that there was this link with the Saudi royal family, and suddenly, while this whole thing is going on in Congress, Trump is inviting the head of the Saudi royal family. You think that is a coincidence?
Good point. Wow. How about that? Wow.
It's something that makes you understand that there is something else going on here.
Yeah.
And it's pretty scary. I think it's very suspicious and very scary. But of course, amongst also the various things that were found amongst the items seized from Jeffrey Epstein's estate, especially in New York, there was a so-called, and I hear it, fake Saudi passport.
That's right.
So I mean,
well, I mean, he's working for the intelligence agencies, and I can tell you, they can make passports easily for anyone.
Why Saudi? And plus,
right,
the residence in another place that was kind of interesting in our story, and that's Austria. Because Austria is connected to also all this story. So it's like there is a connection there down the line with Austria also. Because at the time, and this is then makes much more sense for our viewers to understand, Ronald Lauder became, at that time, in the US ambassador to Austria. And that was the year in which, after Roy Cohn died, they passed on officially the sanction that the guy who will be in charge of this whole blackmailing theory would be Jeffrey Epstein.
So who do you think is doing Jeffrey Epstein's work now?
I think that you see, today we are in a completely new era, because today we are in the era of the internet, in the era of artificial intelligence, and so it becomes much more difficult. I mean, it is like hiding is not possible. You know, today you can't simply lose a passport or a stamp changes your identity, because today you have 1,000 ways of tracing a guy, you know, with facial recognition things, you know, vocal recognition. People say, oh, but I'm going to change phone number, I'm going to have a burner phone. They will, after 20 seconds, recognize your voice and at that point identify you, because they have extremely sophisticated equipment that wasn't present before. So I think that today the work that Jeffrey Epstein was doing sounds a bit reminiscent of those espionage tales where you have those points of where you had, for example, you know, rooms full of people intercepting phone calls, maybe with, you know, recording on a. It kind of sounds a little bit too. I think that today it might be more possible that you are working with very sophisticated hackers, with people within the tech world, rather than people. And Epstein knew, though, that we were going towards an AI reality, because he himself was involved with it, like I explain in my book. I mean, people like Peter Thiel and Palantir, what is he doing? I mean, so it's like, I think that today it's a little bit of a different world, but the players, the new players of the game, amongst the new players would be definitely a guy like Peter Thiel. That's why I absolutely distrust J.D. Vance as being a possible alternative to Trump.
Yeah, I don't see it either.
I don't see it. So I think that today we need to be very much more, you know, like in the past, you had these people that were running around the world thinking they own it. Now, these people have a system technologically that protects them from, you know, the mass, and they are becoming more and more part of a techno-feudal empire. And that means people who have extreme wealth today, they're simply investing in the cyber Satan artificial intelligence setup. Like I explained in my book, by the way, Peter Thiel comes from a family who has its roots in Frankfurt. In fact, in my book on Jeffrey Epstein, I explain that the relationship of the Sabbatian Frankist and the Christian families, like Thiel's families in Frankfurt, is a relationship that goes back hundreds of years. So it's, I think, a guy also that is always talking about the Antichrist as his pastime. And he makes conferences about it and all that. I mean, it's definitely a guy that doesn't inspire me confidence. A guy who this year was one of the main guests at the Bilderberg Club that was taking place in Sweden. It's not somebody who inspires me a lot of. Now, we're talking about a guy who's doing predictive policing, counterterrorism analysis, works for the intelligence community here in the USA, USIC, works for the United States Department of Defense. The software that he's creating is used for missions, critical national security system. You understand that even in your time in the CIA, no? What you were doing back then couldn't be done now in the same way, because the technology has evolved.
No,
completely different.
Absolutely. I mean, we were going into. Remember when you used to go? You didn't have internet connections. So you had to go into like these internet connection. They have rooms, and you go on the computers and you buy time and stuff like that. Some of our case officers would go in there. We give them protection, of course, and they go in and they would go into these rooms, and they would be able to track the people that had been in there because they had technology to do that. Of course, now the satellite and all of the Wi-Fi and all that kind of stuff.
But still today, for example, I have a relative who has security, goes into the hotel where the boss has to stay, and the digital footprints, like you said, are scanned. They make sure that there is no way that their computers that they're going to be used or mobile phones will be hacked. It's becoming a different way of approaching the whole spy business. And so it has evolved in a way that today, will Jeffrey Epstein be able to have the same level of impunity? I think probably that the islands that he was purchasing, because in the last years of his life, he also purchased an island next to Little St. James, a bigger one.
Bigger one, yeah.
The plan was to isolate those islands then from any kind of scrutiny, with the heavy use of technology, because only in that kind of setup you can really isolate yourself from the phone cells, everything else, satellites. You can shield everything, and maybe at that point have a level of impunity like he used to have. Palantir, and the fact that he was linked to Palantir, the fact that Palantir is involved in government surveillance through artificial intelligence and facial recognition, tells you all there is you need to know that. It's like, So today we are now facing, I think, for most of America, what has happened with the Jeffrey Epstein scandal has demonstrated that there is a compromise for anybody who even comes close to power, and that Washington, D.C. is in itself compromised to a level that, yes, you can have great promises in your electoral campaigns. You can promise the moon and back, but are they ever going to deliver to us? Even this populist, side of Trump is now showing instead the different side. Yeah. And I don't know if everybody's happy about it. MAGA needs to become independent from Trump and needs to always prioritize America first.
Good point. Yeah.
So, it's about...
It's like we, the people. It's not about these politicians going to make things.
It's not about letting 600,000 Chinese young students and potential spies in our countries, because that means to be a traitor. So when Marjorie Taylor Greene said, Trump called me a traitor, let me explain what a traitor is. And a lot of people now are saying, oh, Marjorie Taylor Greene should have never criticized the president yesterday. Or I think that speech she gave was spot on. They were very powerful people who didn't want this stuff known, even partially their names revealed. Like I said earlier, I doubt that we might have investigations into these powerful people. There might be some of them who might be exposed, but the level of power that is beyond Epstein is at the level.
They're not going to be convicted. They're not going to be convicted.
Listen, when you see the people behind Epstein are the people who have financed every governor in every state of the United States of America, every single senator, then at that point you are like, these people, they were forced yesterday into voting. And it was kind of like really funny to see that there was only this one loose guy,
right,
who voted no. And I think that the loose guy who voted no, probably, maybe he had more coherence than other people. Maybe he knew that it was political suicide, though, because at that point, he appeared everywhere and everywhere. that guy is never going to have a future in politics anymore.
Yeah, he's I can't think of his name right now. From Louisiana, he's pretty strong.
Yeah.
He'll probably survive, but yeah, Trump had said he wants all the Republicans to vote, and there was one Democrat I saw that had voted nay as well, and then eventually it went off. So then no Democrats. I guess somebody got to him and said, "Yeah, you need to change that vote." But there's nothing going to happen. I agree with you. It's.
I mean, the guy we're talking is this Clay. What's his name? Higgins or
that's it.
Clay,
yeah,
from Louisiana.
Clay Higgins, I think that's it. Yeah.
The thing is, when you start saying, okay, we can't expose because there is this and this other reason. At the end of the day, who are these people in Congress representing? In theory, the people of the United States of America, we citizens of we the people should be owning their asses, but we are not.
Yes.
So it's like these people are compromised, and the level of compromise that has been shown now has been, I think, disappointing for all of us.
Yes.
The fact that we see very big difference, when Vladimir Putin raised to fame in the Russian Federation, he took all the money, all the riches of the oligarchs, he literally and started to redistribute them, because he saw that immediately after the fall of the Soviet Union, these people, in a way, had taken advantage of things. So I think that it's important to realize that a leader needs to be just. A leader needs to be just. A leader needs to be somebody who also gives back to the people. We still have 3 years. Everything is possible. Anything is possible. What is your idea about it, Michael?
Yeah, it's got to come from we the people. We can't depend on any of the politicians. They just cover for each other. They're all corrupt. And so, yeah, we have to find someone that's going to be a true leader. No one that's like, bought and paid for by Peter Thiel, right? So I don't see.
The problem is in this present situation in America, where politics has such high cost. We saw how much money Kamala Harris spent, over $1.5 billion. I mean, it was just like incredible, the amount of money that was spent in that campaign. And of course, also Trump. I mean, you need billions.
They pay for people to support them. Like Republicans, they'll get volunteers to go out and, do politicking and, voter registrations or like that. The Democrats pay people. They own everything.
Regardless of the politics.
Yeah,
Republicans or Democrats, you need the money. So even if, the idea might have been a great idea initially when Elon Musk said, I want to create an alternative party. But then he saw himself that it wasn't really feasible in this in this two-party system, which is already rigged and paid for. So it is very difficult. But going back to, of course, the subject of that we are discussing and what we are seeing with what has developed in recent times. Like we said, it wasn't born out simply of recent things that maybe Epstein, was this singular kind of guy who suddenly found a way to blackmail people and work for this or this. No, we see that it is a system that he inherited. So it is a system that somebody else might inherit. We said also that they might not have the same characteristic because technology has evolved. Today, you can find through dating apps, social networks, more information about potential victims for sexual human trafficking. that in the past you couldn't, because they relied the information directly on, on the internet, their photos. So it's not like, I don't see in the year 2025 somebody like Ghislaine Maxwell waiting in front of a school for where 13-year-old come out, because after 2 minutes they will have their photo probably made by some mother on their phone. They will be exposed in some way, maybe. It will be, so that will be a little bit more difficult. You understand? It's like the concept of recruiting in the way that it was done back then. I don't think it can be replicated today, but there is other ways, unfortunately, especially through technology, that make it possible.
Yeah, definitely.
There is large human trafficking operations that take place today, unfortunately.
Yeah, I have a friend, Louis Herms, who's running for governor of California, and he wants to do away with the taxes, all kinds of crazy stuff, go after child trafficking. He's got great ideas. He's been a broadcaster like myself. He's traveled all over the U.S. Doing events. You look at him, he's got a great chance, but he's already being attacked by, like we're talking about, this electronic, thing that comes at that they come after you with, and he's got other people that are want to support him, very high level people. I've heard like RFK Jr. Wants to support him, but he's got to overcome some stuff, and he's like just a guy like you and I that has great ideas that can make a change, but we have a massive system that's going to try and destroy him. He's got no dirt on him, so they're not going to try to destroy him, trying to suppress him. Already they've been doing it. How does somebody like that rise to the top? That's what we're talking about right now.
And let's not forget that even people like RFK might have been compromised and blackmailed. We know that recently there is this whole story of this Olivia Nuzzi that came out that was somehow involved with RFK and this infidelity saga. We don't really know the level. These people have information on everybody, and they will always use it against you once you reach some level of power.
And if they don't have anything, they'll just lie, make it up, and then push it out there like it's real. And then,
but I actually,
they'll just keep on.
That is also true. That is also a possibility. But if you think about it, the people they eventually have always led into power are the ones who they can blackmail with more ease because they are compromised. I will never forget that image that circulated briefly during the pandemic of those two congressmen having sex in Congress, homosexual sex.
Yeah.
It was never mentioned after who they were. Everything was forcefully removed from the internet, and nothing to see here. Pass on. But the system is so corrupt there that so the Sabbatian Frankists have always known that from the very start. From the very start, they knew that sex could have been at the same time something that they could use at an occult level, but something they could use also at a political level. And so they have always had that idea of manipulating people through the use of sex. Now, they are not the only sect that has done that in the course of humankind. There has been many others who have attracted the weak men with that kind of activity, including more recent Scientology, for example, and so on.
Right.
But I think that the way that the system has been built, with the Sabbatian Frankists being involved in the banking system, then later on being involved at very high levels in science. I mean, we are talking about also people who are very smart, the Einsteins of the situation. It's always Stein. It's always the Stein that goes in, and that Stein, that stone, it's always present. So for me, I think today we have realized that yes, like you said, there might be people who want to try to run for office, but trying is one thing. Achieving then a success. I personally was involved in politics briefly in Italy. I saw the level of corruption. I was so disgusted with it that it was simply an experiment I wanted to use to see it from inside, like seeing how it is to run for office.
Yeah, many times, many ways. Yeah.
But once they arrive to certain positions, if they become like Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, who suddenly from one day to another, they abandon the whole Epstein thing and they become silent. Dan Bongino was a guy who was doing shows every day, who was very public, very talkative. He maybe gives an occasional 1 to 4, maybe one interview a month, maybe. But we're talking about really levels of silence which are kind of disturbing if you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
No?
Definitely. Yeah,
so we definitely have to maybe in the future go back on this topic, because I'm sure that once it's gonna evolve in one direction or the other, the Epstein saga is not gonna end up here simply with this vote in Congress, because I think that either they're going to redact the hell out of it, either they're going to start to stop certain things. And then let's also think about the fact that what they are making public in those so-called Epstein files that the Congress wants to is been voting for is not the entirety of the judiciary material that is available. So it's always partial. So the people will be more and more disappointed, disgusted, drawn to abandon politics, and then at the same time we are instead being more and more manipulated by a reality where the AI will probably lead us from the White House, and Congress will become a simple tool of this artificial reality which is taking place. That is unfortunately what's going to happen. In 10 years from now, politics is not going to have the same identity. And
well, there's other ways that they can, compromise and, threaten. I was talking to a doctor earlier today, and he said that he and another group, very powerful group, had basically convinced Trump that he didn't need to go forward with Operation Warp Speed. And then he had a meeting with, very high-level people, Microsoft, Bill Gates type, who came in, and he had a vial, and he said, this vial right here will kill 75% of the people of the earth. And we have these in different locations around the earth. You will do the vaccination, or we will release it. That's what he said. So, there's many other ways to compromise. We don't have to have people compromise sex positions with children or whatever. They have, like you mentioned, a bioweapon potentially, release that's coming next year. So,
well, yes, that is what they are, anticipating already on The Economist, and such a gloom and doom scenario for the future by a mainstream publication like The Economist is not, a conspiracy theory publication with all the, this is considered a serious publication. Though today we don't consider as serious the mainstream news, it's still part of the established news system. I want to thank you for giving me this possibility today, as usual, to dig deep and show that really a lot of the truths that were accused of being conspiracy theories. People like me, for decades, were trying to bring out these truths and have always been derided. Maybe we were right all along, and now we will see the mainstream jumping on board and starting to admit that that is the case. I think that at one point, though, once you admit that that is true, is because these people, they don't care anymore if you expose them, because they have reached a level in which you cannot, you can't change their plans, or you can't even see what they're doing, because the level of invisibility maybe has grown exponentially since Jeffrey Epstein's experience. They also might have taken Jeffrey Epstein's experience in Little St. James, in the Zorro Ranch, or in New York as something that then they can draw some conclusions on how to operate in the future. And like I said, technology will always be of help for these people. And now in volume 11, you see, you have just shown the image of Thomas Crooks, which is now being debated because they say that he was also into the fairy. He was also had a whole digital imprint that wasn't taken seriously or ever made public by the FBI. Let's not forget that his body was quickly eliminated and incinerated, and we don't have any trace of it. The FBI needed to be exposed by Pambondi, Dan Bongino, Kash Patel, who is now in charge of it. We thought about finally a Department of Justice who will be put upside down, and all wokeism will be expelled, and the deep state will be running away and hiding after that. But I don't see that happening, unfortunately. I see, unfortunately, these people still in charge. And it seems like you can maybe change the facade a little bit. It's very symbolic what has happened to the Little St. James Temple of Jeffrey Epstein, because this image here, now they have painted it in white, and it's like really? They have, because they have made the island a tourist island. So they have purified it almost with the painting into white, very symbolic, of wanting to purify the whole thing. But we remember also what was written in the Georgia Guidestones, that suddenly in the middle of the pandemic, they were blown up like, their message was there. And it's a message that will stay in our minds. So thank you for once again giving me the opportunity for this great chat with you. And let's hope that people can really understand it's not about the politics anymore. It's about awareness. And once you have that awareness, try to make the best of it without following the rules and following the trends of the system that is pushing you one against the other, because there is no just people in this political establishment of sorts. They might be a little bit better than the other for a number of reasons. Of course, I voted for Trump. Many other people who are following us today voted for Trump. We dodged the bullet with Kamala Harris. But the problem is that anybody that arrives there, especially in their second mandate, the level of compromise is much higher.
Yeah.
And we have seen it with many other presidents also in their second mandate. It's almost like in the second mandate, they have to make everybody happy, their friends in the upper echelons happy before they make happy the masses, because they don't have any reasons to, they're not going to present themselves for another election. They don't need the support of the people. They need the support of the establishment. Right. And that's what I've seen yesterday with that dinner in the White House, unfortunately. God bless you all, and God bless our great Michael Jago that can continue his mission. Take care.
Take care. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.